we have any more lights on in here? Broken. Brilliant. Okay, good afternoon and welcome to this meeting of the Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor James Wright, Chair of the Scrutiny Committee, and I'll be chairing the meeting. To begin with, a few matters of housekeeping. Now, I did have a piece in here to talk about a fire alarm that might be happening, a fire alarm test. The test has now happened. We may have another one, but we probably won't. But if you do hear the fire alarm, it will probably just be a test, hopefully. Please, with speakers, use microphones at all times and speak directly into the microphone. Please mute the microphones when not speaking. The meeting is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. Members of the committee may use electronic devices to access their meeting papers, and visitors are welcome to use mobile phones and other devices, including cameras. But please use them discreetly, set them to silent, and do not use voice or camera flash functions. Members of the committee and officers will introduce themselves, starting from my left and going around the room.
Councillor Lucy Galvin.
Good afternoon, Councillor Richard Laws.
Councillor Kate Oliver.
Councillor Jenny Knight, subbing for Councillor Ian Stute.
Councillor Hannah Höchner.
Councillor Sue Sands.
Councillor Gary Champion.
Councillor Mike Sands.
Councillor Paul Kendrick.
Councillor Gurpreet Padder, Cabinet Member for Equalities and Social Justice.
Anessa Salmon, Interim Director of HR.
Tracy Woods, Strategic Procurement Manager.
Charlotte Sprague, Senior Procurement Business Partner.
Clive Morgan, the Infrastructure Security and Support Manager.
Julia Medler, Head of Customers IT and Digital.
Davina House, Executive Director, Communities and Housing.
Emily Yule, Executive Director of Resources, and I'll also be covering the Monitoring Officer role this evening.
Thank you very much, everyone, for that. So item 1 is apologies. We've had apologies from Councillor Fulton McAllister and Councillor Smith, and where there is no substitute. And
Chair, yes, can I apologise? I will have to leave early due to a personal matter that has recently come up.
Thank you. We've also had apologies from Councillor Stuteley, and as Councillor Knight has already said, Councillor Knight is here subbing, so welcome. So item 2, any declarations of interest that members need to disclose? No, thank you. Third item is item 3, the minutes. The minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of November are before the committee for confirmation. Are there any points of accuracy that need to be raised? No, in which case could I have a proposer for those and a seconder? Proposer is Councillor Galvin, seconder. Councillor Champion, I think it's there first. Okay, for all those who are here, could you please indicate if you're happy to approve those minutes? Anyone against approving them? Any abstentions? So the abstentions are just people who weren't present for the meeting and therefore can't speak to the minutes accuracy. So we now move on to item 4, which is a call-in of the IT infrastructure refresh decision taken at the meeting of Cabinet on 3rd of December 2025. A protocol for scrutiny call-in has been provided in the agenda pack. Please can I have a proposer and a seconder to agree the call-in protocol, and we will follow that for this item. So I'll propose that. Could I have a seconder for that? Councillor Galvin. So any members in favour of following that protocol, please indicate. Any against? Abstentions? No, that's carried. Thank you. So we're just following the protocol that's in the agenda pack. So a call-in was submitted by 4 members of the committee, including myself. The scope of the call-in has been set out in the protocol and call-in notice. Please can members note the scope of the call-in and note that we may only discuss the principles of decision-making with regard to specific points listed in the scope. Firstly, the report to Cabinet is vague. It speaks about equipment being older, but doesn't go into specific details about what equipment is being replaced for 550,000 of expenditure. A more thorough report could include what the Council's processing requirements are and how much data storage we need. The report is not clear about why delegating to the Executive Director of Resources is necessary and why full approval cannot come back to Cabinet. The doing nothing is not a viable option statement does not detail what steps have been taken to consider longer term use of existing equipment and the cost of buying in additional support. The report states a neutral effect on safeguarding adults and children. If doing nothing is not an option, how can it not be a positive effect? I.e., if cybersecurity is compromised or if the system fails, in part so activities cannot take place, then that can lead to safeguarding risks. Point 5, the report states that the most sensible approach to refresh the IT hardware now, providing a stable, supported platform for the foreseeable future, but does not set out why a cloud migration has not been considered or why a hardware as a service model is also not being considered. And lastly, the report talks about a framework procurement for 550,000 spend, but provides no further details as to what framework is being considered. So on the protocol, the third point is that the signatories will now be invited to address the committees with the reasons why. Having spoken to the signatories, those reasons have already just been read out by me. So I think at this stage we won't address the committee, and I'll hand over to Councillor Padder to address the committee. Councillor Sands.
On number 4 of the reasons for calling, it doesn't strike me as being, it seems to have a double negative in it. How can it not be a positive effect if doing nothing is an option? And the semantics of that just don't seem right to me.
Well, the call-in has been accepted, so yeah, that we'll leave that as stands. It may not end up being a recommendation anyway,
Yeah.
but yeah, thank you for
We'll
noting that.
have to look back at the semantics of that when we get to it then.
Councillor Padder.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I just wanted to quickly thank Julia, Clive and Emily and officers for all the hard work on the IT refresh. In terms of the background, the core IT hardware was procured in 2020 and will be 6 years old by 26-27. At this age, equipment becomes vulnerable to failures and harder to support. Some services have already been moved to third-party cloud solutions. The rationale behind the recommendations is that the refresh reduces risk of service failure, ensures we have a stable IT platform during local government reorganisation and beyond, and provides flexibility for the new entity to decide its long-term IT strategy without inheriting unsupported infrastructure. Now, progressing to the questions, or the responses rather, the IT infrastructure refresh will replace 11 end of support service servers, the primary and secondary storage area network, the top of rack network equipment, and the primary and secondary backup servers with their associated storage, which were procured and installed in 2020. You learn something new every day. This IT infrastructure supports many core services, including planning and regulatory, GIS, document management, identity management, remote access and security solutions. The platform is used to keep data secured at the primary and resilient server environments and capacity to handle a single host failure. The Cabinet didn't require the detailed specification of IT equipment to be procured, as officers will ensure the specification meets the requirements. However, the procurement exercise will specify the requirements based upon results coming from industry tools that capture current performance and configuration data. Given the Cabinet has established a scope, budget and compliant procurement route for this investment, delegation is sought to allow the Executive Director of Resources to complete the contract award in consultation with the portfolio holder through the Council's established procurement processes. This approach maintains member oversight while avoiding duplication of approvals. A capital bid was submitted in 2024 to 25 to fund an IT infrastructure refresh, recognising the existing 5-year vendor support arrangement was due to expire. Following discussions with finance, it was agreed that the refresh would be deferred by 1 year, and alternative quotations were sought to extend support during the interim period. 2 quotations were received, £63,000 for combined hardware and software support and £13,000 for hardware only support. The capital programme budgets, including the IT infrastructure refresh budget, were approved by full council in February 2025, subject to the submission and approval of a business case by the Capital Board. On the basis that the capital spend would be deferred from 24-25 to 25-26, work was undertaken to ensure that the server and storage environment was upgraded to the latest supported software versions. To manage the 1-year deferral and mitigate operational risk during 25-26, the hardware-only support option was selected. This hardware support arrangement expires in May 2026. There remains a risk that any newly identified software vulnerabilities may not be fully addressable without active vendor software support. However, following the application of software updates in April 2025, the implementation of other security controls, the hardware-only support option for 1 year was assessed as an acceptable level of risk. The Capital Board confirmed the capital budget decision in September 2025 following submission of the approved business case. There is finite period for which IT equipment refreshes can be deferred, and it is essential that the council does not place services to residents or internal operations at risk, nor become overly reliant on suppliers without viable alternatives. While the purchase of an additional year of support was considered acceptable, any further delay would require full hardware and software support at an estimated cost of approximately £63,000 per year, compared with an estimated £1,000 per year for new infrastructure. Renewed warranty extensions often become subject to a number of caveats, most notably that replacement parts are provided on a best endeavours basis and only where spares can be sourced. As the equipment continues to age beyond its original life cycle, the availability of compatible replacement components reduces significantly. This increases the likelihood of extended outages in the event of hardware failure and places greater reliance on secondary or refurbished parts, which may not be available within required timescales. Is everyone still with me? Good.
Very much so.
In parallel, the cost of maintaining support for aging infrastructure increases year on year as vendors price in the high risk and diminishing availability of spares. The estimated £63,000 per year for full hardware and software support should therefore be regarded as minimum, with costs expected to rise over time, while the level of assurance and resilience provided decreases. By contrast, investment in new infrastructure at an estimated £100,000 per annum provides full vendor support, guaranteed availability of replacement parts, access to ongoing security updates, and improved performance and resilience. When assessed over the medium term, the new infrastructure option represents a better value for money and more sustainable risk position than continuing to incur increasing support costs for equipment that is beyond its intended service life. The impact is assessed as neutral because the IT refresh maintains existing safeguarding arrangements rather than changing them. It improves system stability and reduces the risk of failure or cyber compromise. Doing nothing could create a negative safeguarding impact, but as this is a like-for-like replacement, it is assessed as neutral. The capital business case and the IT strategy references cloud-based solutions. Alternative procurement and financial models, such as hardware as a service, have a role to play. However, these approaches are most appropriately considered on a service by service and application by application basis, typically aligned to contract renewal points. For the moment, a wholesale mitigation of the IT estate to cloud-based services within the next 2 years is not feasible. Such an approach would require extensive engagement with multiple suppliers and council service leads, significant redesign of services and interfaces, and clarity over future application choices, which is not yet available given the uncertainty surrounding LGR. While the hardware as a service can offer benefits in certain circumstances, it is not considered the most appropriate option at the moment. Some HaaS models or hardware as a service may result in higher total costs compared to a capital funded refresh, particularly where capital budgets have already been identified and approved. HaaS arrangements usually involve multi-year contractual commitments. Entering into such agreements now could restrict the flexibility of the new authority and potentially leave it locked into arrangements that may not align with future and organisational or service decisions. Introducing a new consumption-based model would add commercial, legal and operational complexity at a time when stability is a priority. Given the need to avoid further extensions of warranty and software cover beyond May 2026, the lower risk approach was selected to refresh the existing IT hardware estate using the available capital funding to provide a stable, supported and reliable platform for the foreseeable future. And finally, at the point of writing the capital report, the specific framework had not been confirmed. This was due to the need to align procurement timescales with committee approval cycles and to ensure that the renewal and associated hardware and software procurement could be timed as close as possible to May 2026. The imperative was to avoid the need to further extend warranties beyond 2026 and to complete the refresh activity early in the year to move off the current infrastructure. By scheduling the procurement activity during January and February, it allows for orders to be placed in April, aligning delivery and implementation with the May 2026 timeframe.
Yeah, thank you very much, and yeah, I thank you actually for putting some giving information where I think it wasn't there in the original report, which was certainly one of my concerns with the call-in. And in fact, the original report talks about the dates that the Capital Programme Board had sight of the business case. I'm just interested why Cabinet was never presented with a copy of that business case. If the information you've given us just now had been in that original public-facing report, we probably could have avoided this process that we're going through now. So I just wonder if there's a reason why not only was Cabinet not given it, but it wasn't in the document that went before Cabinet.
Text behind that.
I think the business case was for assurance for Capital Board, so it was crafted for the Capital Board, not to accompany the Cabinet report. So that was with the decision not to accompany it with as an appendices with the Cabinet report, because it was to assure Capital Board.
But I guess my concern is that Cabinet then went into that decision-making process almost with one arm tied behind their back, because they didn't have sight, certainly not in the public domain, of I think the very reasonable points that we've heard Councillor Padder make this evening. And I wonder whether, as a set of principles going forward, whether we could be better at making sure some of that stuff, even if it's not directly related to supporting the decision, but is certainly there so that people have some surety that that was a part of the decision making and consideration process? Emily.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points in response to that. I think that there's an important separation between officer role and councillor role in some of this discussion. And you have expert officers employed by this council to make recommendations about detailed things like specification of IT renewal equipment. And, you know, I think that the Cabinet are making a decision around allocating spend based on an officer recommendation that the equipment being put in place will satisfy the requirements of the council. So they're relying on that technical expertise. Take on board the point around attaching business cases. Of course, in some cases that would need to be a below the line appendix because it could contain commercial information about the contract that we're tendering for.
And it's a valid point you make around expert officers. The only thing I will say is there are certain areas of council spend where there will be incredibly detailed reports that go into very significant detail, particularly around things like where we're doing something, the housing revenue account or whatever, stuff that people can get on board with in terms of boilers or new doors for properties. And I wondered whether this wasn't there because, you know, as Councillor Padder, I guess demonstrated in sort of reading out some stuff which wasn't your everyday language in terms of doing speaking about IT, that actually it's not there because it's IT. Anyway. I'll stop talking in a minute. I'll bring Councillor Padder in, then I'll answer.
Just a quick reflection as well. I think there's a couple of issues, again, to reiterate your point, Emily. I think that it's really that distinction between officers and councillors is really important. We are not experts, we're elected politicians, but the other point is that, you know, that capacity in that team, I've seen them work, and they can't. We have to at some point trust that they have the expertise to procure what they need to, and they do have the expertise. So it was entrusted that they would procure whatever was needed in the right way and transparent, and we were satisfied with that.
Okay, thank you. I'll bring some other members now. Which other members would like to ask anything? Councillor Galvin.
Thank you, and thank you for the explanation. I think the report does ask for £550,000 of expenditure, but doesn't give those details that we've now heard on what was being replaced and the actual processing and storage requirements. So that level of clarity is actually necessary for good decision making and public scrutiny. I think that's why there's a call in. I wondered why it delegates authority. Sorry if you've answered that, but it delegates the authority rather than returning to Cabinet for final approval. I also wanted, because that is a significant investment, and is there a danger that LGR, do you think that, I heard LGR mentioned as part of the decision-making process, quite a significant part there, but is there a danger that LGR is leading to decisions being taken that are not optimal for the council, that cost the council more and are potentially less effective?
I think around the question on the LGR, I think LGR is a bit of a moving beast, and how we do deliver on our services will change, I think, quite frequently between now and whenever the decisions are taken that are suitable for local government reorganisation. On the other specific points, perhaps I can delegate to colleagues.
I think it's in terms of the delegated authority, it's about the timing, because we've got a support contract that runs out in May, and and it does go in, just talk through it, but we need to be able to either have the new infrastructure in place, or an alternative is an extension of a support contract, which will be quite costly. So that's why we wanted to give delegated authority to try and streamline that process, and you know that is the normal process that we would follow and have done previously.
Thank you. Any more questions? Any other members have any questions on this? So thank you. Well, we've got 3 possible courses of action as a committee, which are listed in the protocol. The first one is to refer the matter back to Cabinet for reconsideration, together with the observations of the Scrutiny Committee. Cabinet will then take a final decision, and that decision cannot be called in. The second one is to refer the matter to full council, who can object to the decision that has been made. If they do object, then the decision will be referred back to Cabinet, together with the council's views on the decision. If council does not object to the decision, then the decision will be implemented following the close of the meeting. And the third option is that the decision be upheld and implemented immediately. Whichever option we go for, we need to give a clear and detailed reasons for whichever course we take. I still have some concerns about the business case not being provided to Cabinet. I'm not sure that necessarily meets the threshold of referring it back to Cabinet to look at the decision again. But as a general point in principle, I would like that to sort of be on the record that for all decisions, not just ones that relate to IT spend, we ought to be very clear about making sure that the rationale is there. Councillor Hoekner.
Yeah, I share your concern, and I'd also think more comprehensive report would have been in the interest of everyone. And I just have a question about timelines, because we heard that there is time pressure to get an arrangement in place that secures continuity. But I was wondering whether the 6th of January extraordinary cabinet meeting, whether that would be an opportunity potentially for them to see it again, but that might be a compromise to not just push it back to the next scheduled normal cabinet meeting.
I think the only challenge for a 6th of January meeting is I think the agenda would have had to have been published today. Is that right?
So to comply with legal deadlines, the agenda doesn't have to be published today for the extraordinary council and cabinet meeting. However, an extraordinary meeting is typically called for a single purpose.
Yeah.
We have discussed the possible outcomes of today's call-in process. So we have looked at the 14th of January as the next cabinet meeting, if you were minded to refer it back to Cabinet, and we can accommodate that additional step of the decision making on the basis that should Cabinet decide to uphold their original decision, there won't be that call-in period, so we could then start to get on with it straight after that meeting.
Okay, Councillor Kendrick.
I fully understand and respect the chair's knowledge about IT, and I can understand why you were concerned, and I think that was I appreciate that. But I think that Councillor Padilla has introduced this item in detail, and I think it was presented very well, and I'm now personally satisfied. So my own personal option would be to uphold the decision, but obviously I respect the decision of this committee, but that is my personal opinion.
Thank you. Councillor Galvin.
Thank you. Coming back to LGR and its impact on the decision making, it was obviously a significant impact on the decision making here. I'd like to sort of make the observation that Scrutiny record that was a significant impact, and I'd like to have that a bit more quantified than being a moving beast, if you like. I'd like to see us start to quantify the impact on decisions. I don't know how we make that as a recommendation here, Chair, but I would like to see that recorded, because it is part of the decision making here, and I think it needs noting.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges around recommendations is that because this is a call-in, we are fairly restricted as to what we can do, but these, it is noted, I guess. But Emily, if you could assist us there.
Thank you, Chair. We can certainly note those comments, and it may be that we could start to include a paragraph on LGR implications. So we have an implication section on all reports. We could also start to include LGR implications on each of our reports that come through to Council and Cabinet.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Laws.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just express my support for what Councillor Kendrick has just said. I think there clearly is a distinction between a procedural issue and the substantive issues. On the substantive issues, I can't see any problem, and I would suggest that we we uphold the decision with sort of written reasons that we've heard further information at this committee. In going forward, we would, suggest a different, rather different procedure, and also make the point about LGR impact as part of the written sort of submission around that agreement.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else have any comments one way or the other? Councillor Sands.
Yeah, I agree that we should sort of uphold the decision and include that caveat about the influences of LGR. I do think as we go further down the track and get closer to the stage where LGR is implemented, we're going to find more unexpected things, or unknown unknowns, as it was put famously in some recent conflict. And so I think we need to prepare for that and simply make provision to include a caveat when we have reports, not just on this, but probably other items as well.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Padder.
That was pretty much what I was going to say as well. I think there's a further conversation to be had on LGR, and I think I am concerned about capacity within the team. It's really important that we map the expectations of LGR and all the work going on there with the work that we're doing for the IT. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Knight.
Yeah, so I do think it, personally, I think that we should uphold the cabinet decision, but I do think that this is sort of a question of how much information was shared originally, and we should be able to see the expertise of the officers, and that way we can make sure that cabinet are making the right decisions informed by them. So if we had had that originally, the call-in probably wouldn't have been worth it. Thank you.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what Councillor Knight has just said there. I think coming into this, there was a significant information void. I think that void has now been resolved, and thanks to the presentation that Councillor Padder has given, along with some of the other officer answers, I think we're in a much clearer place now, particularly with some of the recognition of some of the comments of the committee around greater information and references to LGR. So I'm proposing that we vote to uphold the decision of cabinet. Could I have a seconder for that? Councillor Laws was in first with that. We'll put that to the vote then. All those in favour, please indicate. That is unanimous. So thank you very much. It may seem like an inconvenience, but I think it's quite important just to be able to, from time to time, where there's something that doesn't feel quite right, to be able to bring it back before this committee. So thank you all very much for the time today, and also the time putting together the very detailed presentation that Councillor Padder has given us today. So thank you very much. We'll just have a few moments while there's a reordering of the chairs. Okay, thank you. So I've agreed as chair to swap the pre-scrutiny of the Anglia Square business plan and the quality information report around, so the agenda. So we'll now move to the quality information report. So I'll hand over to Councillor Padder again to introduce the report. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Chair, members. Also, thanks to Officers Joe and Nick for leading this work, and particularly in drafting the Equality Information Report 2026 alongside the EDI Action Plan 25-26 Progress Update. The report is presented here for scrutiny to comment and make recommendations ahead of Cabinet on the 14th of January 2026. As you may know, publishing the Equality Information Report is a statutory requirement under the Equality Act public sector equality duty, and we must publish this by the end of January each year. But this report is more than just compliance. It is the Council's commitment to being evidence informed. By using robust data and insight, we shape better services and policy and target resources where they make the greatest difference to people's lives. The report remains consistent with our community-led plan priorities, but also goes further by bringing together headline equality data about our residents, tenants, customers and workforce, and it aligns with our EDI strategy and its 3 equality objectives. This year, we've added a progress update on the EDI action plan so members can see how actions across services are tracked against our equality objectives. As always, we remain committed to improving the services by targeting support where it makes the biggest difference, and in doing so, embedding equality and inclusion at the heart of Norwich City Council services. We welcome your insights, questions and recommendations that will strengthen the final publication ahead of the deadline at the end of January 2026. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I now invite members to ask some questions. I think, Nick, you said that maybe if they came in groups, that might assist things, just to pull up the appropriate information. So we'll take a few questions and then officers will then answer them. So Councillor Galvin, do you want to go first, and then Councillor Hookner?
So this sort of area I wanted to ask about first, if that helps other people that might be thinking about this area as well, is council staff, and it's actually at the end of the report, so sorry, I've kind of come in at the end, but if that's okay, and it might be picked up later in our HR processes report, or maybe not, but we've asked before for some overall trend data regarding the diversity of council staff over the past 5 or more years, because we have worked hard as a council to make sure that our staff is reflective of the wider population, and it's really important we do that. But those numbers have gone up and down in the past. We've seen them, but I'd like to see that to ask for that to be in this report, and maybe those numbers to come back, so to see the trends and to see where we're going with that.
Do we have any other questions that relate to staffing, just so we could group those together? Councillor Hookner.
Yeah, thank you. I think very much related to the question of data and seeing trends, there's still really large data gaps where people don't disclose what's information about their identity. And so I'm wondering whether the council has a good understanding of why that is the case, or whether there could be an information gathering exercise to understand better what prevents people from revealing this information to the council. Because I think sometimes there's over 20% of people who haven't disclosed, and I think that makes it very difficult to interpret the data. There's another potentially somewhat related question, which is that the council calculates gender pay gaps. I think it's a statutory duty, and there is calculations of ethnicity pay gap, and I'm wondering whether disability pay gaps are also being calculated, or why not, and whether they could be started.
Okay, thank you for that. Is that Councillor Sands, is yours related to staffing as well?
Related to staffing, sort of goes on from there, and probably a more niche aspect. Being Armed Forces champion, of course, I raised the question of the Armed Forces Covenant every so often, and of course there is an impact of that on this in terms of, do we have serving reservists on the staff, our policies towards people who apply for positions on council, if they're leaving service people or ex-service people, and also people who may be part of a ready reserve, people who can be called upon at a moment's notice, for example, to go and serve on active duty. And it'd be interesting to know, the dynamics of that amongst our staff. Do we have, for example, any active reservists at the moment on the staff, and how many people have we had apply for positions recently who are just leaving the services or who are ex-service people? Because that does impact on how we address the Armed Forces Covenant, and which has a direct impact on this.
Okay, great, thank you. Well, there's sort of 4 to be going on with there. So
So I think most of these I would refer to Anessa on, but we can answer a couple of them. First of all, Councillor Galvin, there's obviously no problem with us showing trends across time where we have the data, so we can certainly make that as a recommendation going forwards that we take that on board. So that's not a problem. In terms of the people not giving answers to demographic information, obviously we can't insist, and indeed very often when we have surveys or questions, we want to encourage the greatest participation that we can in the survey, and if giving your demographic data becomes a barrier, then we don't want that to happen because we want to hear their views. So there are data gaps inevitably. I can't speak from the staff point of view, and I'll leave Anessa to take that on board, but from public surveys, etc., where we gather data. I think that's probably all we can answer. I think the rest of it we would have to hand to my esteemed colleague, Anessa from HR. So I'll pass over to you, Vanny. Thank you. If you could answer those questions that have been put forward. So I think one is why staff are, I'm trying to paraphrase here, but why staff are not giving data, demographic data, etc., about themselves. And then I think there were 2 questions on armed forces, which is what level of reservists we have on staff, and if well, the other one is actually a democratic services one, isn't it? It's about council applying for positions on council. If you take those other 2.
Yeah. Hello, my name's Anessa Salmon. I'm the Interim Director of HR. In terms of your question about why people don't declare, there's lots of reasons why people don't declare. And sometimes in an organisation, we don't make it clear to them that this information is confidential, will not be shared. And more importantly, we don't tell them what the purpose of gathering this information is for. And in my world, it's for a very positive reason. It's about helping us as an organisation to better support our workforce. So if we know how many people are disabled, all the various equalities characteristics that there are, then we can actually develop strategies to better support those individuals. So I think the onus is on us, particularly in HR, to ensure that we're sending the right message to staff, to not only encourage them, but to make them feel comfortable that their data is going to be confidential, it's going to be secure, and it's going to be used for the right reasons. So I think we've got a bit of a strategy, a bit of a job to do there. I don't think we've been out to staff for a while to actually encourage and invite them to update their profile. So that's a job to be done, but it's really important because we can't know what budgets, what resources we need and what support the staff need. And in an age where well-being and support for staff is on the rise, we really need to get that information so that we can target the right support. So that's work in progress, really, in terms of going back out to staff to find out the things that we need to. In terms of the armed forces recruitment, I think that was very, very interesting because I haven't seen any data that we've captured in terms of numbers. But what I do know is that, and it's on one of my slides that I'll be presenting a bit later on, what I do know is that we have guaranteed interviews for reservists. So that's a big tick, as long as they meet the essential criteria. We have leave provisions. We have raising awareness via e-learning and intranet resources. And we are looking to explore stronger links with cadet organisations. And also we do have some form of financial support, for example, the council tax reduction for people who can demonstrate that they're part of the armed services. Again, it's something that we need to do a lot more work with. I can't answer the question about numbers because I don't have those numbers. I don't know how many people apply as a reservist, as an armed force member, and how many go through to interview and are appointed and indeed how we support them. But again, it's good that that's coming through here now, because that informs me that that is really important work that we need to delve a little bit more deeply into and get more detail on. So again, we can inform not only the committee, but our workforce and the community what we are doing to support our armed services. So thank you for that.
Right. Thank you very much for that.
Sorry, did I need?
One outstanding question around, we already publish our gender pay gap.
Right.
Our ethnicity pay gap.
Yes.
Is there plans around the disability pay gap?
Yes. The disability pay gap is really important. But again, coming back to my initial point, we need to better understand what the profile looks like. We need to have that data a little bit more robust, a little bit more detailed, so that we can, when we do report on disability pay gap, we've got a better understanding and a more accurate understanding of who sees themselves and as disabled. And there are so many different disabilities now that are coming through. Neurodiversity is just one example of a whole range of different conditions and disabilities that we have to factor into our thinking and our support. So we really need to get that communication out to our employees, to encourage them to let us help them by telling us what we need to know in terms of how best support them with their conditions that they may have.
Thank you. I'm just going to bring in, I think, Councillor Paddy, you indicated, do you wish to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to just share some thoughts on why people perhaps don't feel comfortable filling in their personal data, and it could be just not directly related to council and their services, but really as simple as, you know, trust not being there between organisations, and also, you know, feeling that the information might be used against them. So there could be a whole host of reasons, and I think that it's really important or interesting to unpack some of those issues. There's probably loads of papers out there already on why people don't share that information. 20% seems like quite a big number, I do think, though. Or, I mean, maybe there's some more work to do around trust, but, you know, we're going to come on to those bits later on, aren't we? So, yeah, that's it. Thanks.
It's worth adding on that point from a public point of view is some people don't fill it in because literally they can't be bothered to fill it in, and that's why we really try to ensure that we have as few questions as possible, at the same time as trying to dive as deep as we possibly can with data. But that sometimes means that we have data gaps because we are reducing the amount of questions that we're asking.
Thank you. Okay, so I think I've seen Councillors Knight, Champion and Herkener indicate, so we'll take the questions in that order, please. So Councillor Knight first, thank you.
Well, to the surprise of nobody, I have some questions about 2.3.4, celebrate gender diversity and advance equality and inclusion for transgender and non-binary people, on page 155. So I will go those questions. So it states that an audit has been prepared in readiness to identify where potential updates might need to be applied has been undertaken, waiting on the national guidance after the Supreme Court ruling on biological sex. Can this audit please be shared with this committee to start? And I also see that honorifics are being removed from council forms. In the motion supporting the transgender community, this council resolved to add the MX option on all council forms. Why has the council chosen a different course of action to the one it resolved to undertake in 2022? Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want some more questions and do them in batches, or would you like to answer those questions now?
The honorifics question we would have to refer to Julia, who was here earlier. So we'll do that and come back to you if we may.
I might have a, sorry, can you repeat the question on the honorific, the MX?
So honorifics are being removed from council forms, but in the motion in 2022 supporting the transgender community, this council resolved to add the MX option to all council forms. So why are honorifics now all being removed? It's a different course of action to what was laid out. by the council?
I can answer one part of that,
Yeah.
which is that some of the forms that we have to use are government forms, and we have tried and tried and tried again to have those updated. But clearly, you know, we are one voice. So I know that there is an element of the form filling that we have that is outside of our control. But in terms of internally, I know that we have removed salutations, and I think that that was to be gender neutral. But I'm not. We would need to refer that back, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I think this is something we'll speak to Julie about, because we did some stuff and then we did some other stuff, and I think there might have just been a miss, kind of, they didn't match up in some way. So, you know, but I know we did look at it. So yeah, I'll have to revisit. I hope that's okay.
Yeah, I'd love to speak about this.
Yeah.
Could I suggest as a response to this that indeed the audit as well, which is very much the work that Joe and I have done internally, anticipating what we think may be within the guidance, that perhaps we have a meeting with you and go through that, and perhaps you can guide us in some way through that as well. That would be great. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Champion, please.
Thank you, Chair. If I may can I make 2 points? They're divergent. The first point is just in response to the comment about neurodiversity. As a dyslexic person, I spent the larger portion of my life not telling my employees that I was dyslexic, because I anticipated that would create bias against my ability to progress in any organisation. The current political and media climate has made it controversial to be ADHD. Whilst there are more people applying for that status, the routes to get that are being slimmed down through political decision making. And so I would just also highlight that on LinkedIn now, being dyslexic is considered a skill. And so I think we have to be careful when we're framing, you know, when we're talking about, it's very easy to other people, and when we other people, that will make it less inclusive and not more inclusive. So the language and how we approach people, I think, is really important. So that's more of a comment than a question. But my actual question, which I was hoping to ask, was on page 151. It's about the Go for Less card. I've sat in this chamber before discussing the Go for Less card. And have always been astounded by the lack of uptake by young people in our city when the vast majority of them are applicable for doing this. And I just wonder, since we discussed it last, which I believe was 2 years ago, I think, when we discussed how we needed to encourage young people to get, to engage and find out about this, and they're digitizing this process, or it would appear that they are. And so do we anticipate engaging more young people and increasing our outreach through the Go for Less card scheme?
Again, we would need to take that back. What I can tell you is that the process has been digitised. So how do we know how long that's been digitised? I'm not sure if those results are feeding through yet. I'm not sure how recently that is, but it has been digitised. In terms of any targeted promotions towards younger people, I would need to go back to Culture and Leisure and find out that information.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Herkler.
Thank you. I also have a question about the Go for Less pass. And the report stated that it was particularly offered to asylum seekers and refugees to get this pass, but then the data showing who had taken it up didn't include refugees and asylum seekers. So I was wondering whether the data is being collected or whether it could be collected.
So today, in preparation for this meeting, I reached out to the Culture and Leisure team, and essentially the process is underway to start collecting that data. So we've got a privacy statement drafted, which is going to explain the types of demographic data questions that we're going to be asking of the people applying for the Go for Less scheme. And I've had a verbal assurance that that will be up and running by January next year. So next time we come and discuss this report next year, we'll be able to provide a detailed table with a demographic breakdown of the people accessing the scheme.
Add to that a detailed breakdown of those who offer demographic information accessing the scheme.
Thank you. Councillor Galvin.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. There's a Homes for Ukraine section in the narrative section at the beginning on page 111, which is helpful. And there is information about other refugees, migrants and asylum seekers in the action plan, as was pointed out to me, which is great. But I would like to see a section more about general refugees, migrants and asylum seekers together in the narrative, because it's a bit unbalanced to have a section about Homes for Ukraine and not other areas. And I welcome the council's work to achieve Council of Sanctuary status, and I'd really like to have an update on that at Scrutiny as a recommendation, if possible, if that works for this. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, sorry, I'm happy to answer. We can provide an update on the Council of Sanctuary work, which is ongoing. But I think in terms of asylum seekers and refugees, one of the challenges we have is that the data changes constantly. So, you know, obviously people move in different areas and so on. So we do have data, but it is a constant change. And obviously we have to be quite sensitive as well about lots of data and where we share it. So we can have a look at what we provide, but it will only ever be a snapshot in time, given that people do move around. They do in the Homes for Ukraine scheme as well. But sometimes that is slightly easier to track than obviously when people have their asylum status, given they move in and out and around all sorts of areas, and we don't always have the information, but we can see what we can provide.
Thank you. I guess maybe related to, well, I don't know. So on page 121, there's a table about languages and how the languages have changed over the years. Is that table ordered by effectively proportion of people who don't speak English as a first language? So Arabic is the bulk of non-English speakers. So I guess is that table telling us changing where those groups and the size of those groups of population, i.e. Ukrainian has gone down from 23, 24 into 24, 25. So do we read into that there are now fewer Ukrainians living in Norwich?
I think it's probably we've got sorry. In terms of our direct translation services that we provide, it's usually an indication that there's maybe fewer that need the translation service than overall numbers.
Okay.
So that's a top 10 in order from top down in terms of languages. What I would say is we had some discussion about this within our team, and I always love quoting Disraeli, but lies, damn lies and statistics.
Yeah.
But in trying to analyse it, and we have no evidence to support this, but I think that one of the things that we are cognizant of is that different groups have different mechanisms for different cultures within their family unit or their community unit for disseminating information. And so within some groups of non-English speaking communities, there might be one person within it who actually speaks English and who will share that information, whereas within other groups, people are coming directly to get an answer. So I don't know that it really represents a breakdown of the communities in Norwich. It represents a breakdown of the requests that we're getting for translations, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Oliver and then Councillor Hockner.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, mine's some more of an overarching question. So some of the work that we do is centred around the Equalities Act, but there's also characteristics and existences that we work to protect that aren't actually falling under the Equalities Act. I suppose my question is, what's the risk of some of those strands of work or communities of people we're supporting being dropped when, I don't know, times of political change, budget constraints, all sorts of things? What guarantees do we have that we can continue the work in this direction and yeah, keep protecting more people who need it?
So in response to that, what I would say to you is clearly the groups that we have identified, and indeed Cabinet's recent the Council's recent adoption of the socio-economic duty, for example, those groups are embedded within our corporate strategies, within our EDI strategy. They are named groups, and of course that is further supported by Fair and Norwich within the community-led plan. So in terms of the council's own priorities, those groups will remain there until such a time as the administration, yourselves and others decide that they shouldn't be there, if indeed that ever happens. In terms of LGR and political changes going forwards, of course, I can't anticipate that, and indeed the decisions of those authorities, those groups, will be very much the decisions of those authorities or those groups. Of course, we can pass on the data and the evidence that we have, but that is about as much as we can do. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Herkner next.
Oh no, sorry, I was just going to add that further to Nick's point, those additional groups that we go above and beyond the 9 protected characteristics are also embedded within our new EQIA templates, our quality impact assessment template. So they prompt consideration by council officers when putting forward a proposal around the impacts, both positive and negative, on those groups.
Thank you. Councillor Herkner then Councillor Galvin, then Councillor Champion. Then I'd like to see at that point if we can start getting to any recommendation stage.
Thanks. I've got a question about page 134. There's a table that maps applicants against jobs offered by characteristic, and it looks like white people were more likely to be offered a job than other applicants. It's over women and not disabled applicants, and I was wondering how the council made sense of that, and whether there's maybe an issue of unconscious bias, and whether people on selection panels get unconscious bias training.
I'm not sure whether we have delivered unconscious bias training. We have, yep, excellent. So what we don't do sometimes, we need to refresh that unconscious bias training. We've got lots of new managers, lots of new staff. So it's just about refreshing that unconscious bias training, and also reviewing how we recruit. For example, what's our panel makeup? Do we have a balanced panel? Are we sourcing the right people to recruit? To recruit our applicants. So there's a range of things we need to do in our recruitment strategy in order to better support members of staff who are coming through in terms of diversity. But I would say unconscious bias is a really important tool that we can use to actually demonstrate to staff, to managers, because we all do it in one aspect or another, that, you know, this is going to disadvantage someone, so this is what we need to do to be compliant.
Thank you. Councillor Galvin.
Thank you. On page 124, it's a question for the cabinet member, I think, if that's relevant to this bit. Page 124, the complaints. We have asked this before at scrutiny. There is a big, there's a fat number of 72.7% not recorded in terms of race about complaints. That's huge, and I think we've asked before for a bit of explanation of that. There is an unknown or declined to answer number as well. So, and I think we were given assurances that that would be looked into, but could I perhaps have an assurance that you will look into why that's so high, that we're not recording? Because that could be masking problems that we don't know about, and it would be good to just understand why we're not recording the data about people and if that can be changed.
Yeah, so I think we will take that away and speak to the relevant officers about that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Champion.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to draw our attention to page 166, and it refers to the gold standard for homelessness. I just want to link it in with a comment earlier. We were talking about refugees. I just want to highlight that NatCom, which is charity, which is made up of 140 frontline refugee and migrant organisations, has estimated that refugee homelessness has more than doubled in 2 years. With the current changes of policy in relation to processing times and our apparent inability to be able to identify, we can only have a snapshot of time where refugees are we confident that we are addressing the refugee potential homelessness crisis in our city? And also, as a further question, it's great to read that we've got a gold standard when we've still got 17% of clients seen who don't get out of homelessness. So, and we have appointed a new person to this role. Have we appointed one person to address 17% of people who obviously have the most complex needs? And does that then, you know, like, we're evidently aiming for 100%. So I just can't say I feel very confident. I feel bad for one person being given a role like that, which is evidently going to be very, very difficult. And have they got the support to achieve the aims which the council purports to, especially considering that we started that comment with, look at our gold standard?
Thank you. Davina.
I'm happy to answer that one. Just to clarify what I said about having a snapshot in time, where somebody is seeking asylum or is currently a refugee, we do absolutely know where they are. But clearly, when people are given their status and leave to remain, they are free to live and work wherever they wish. So I think I just wanted to clarify that. So we absolutely do know when people are seeking asylum and they're currently refugees, we absolutely do know and work with colleagues in Home Office and others to be very clear on that. In terms of the gold standard, I know we've had several sessions at Scrutiny about rough sleeping and homelessness, so I don't want to kind of deep dive too much into that because that could take us all evening. You've got a busy agenda. We do have specialist support to support those who are asylum seekers and refugees. We work with them with all sorts of agencies as well to support them into accommodation where absolutely possible. Some will choose to live in this area when they receive their status, others won't. So I'm confident that we've got the resourcing that we need. It is difficult. We do have lots of work to do. Lots of support is needed, but yes, we give the support where it is absolutely needed. I've got staff that can do that. We can provide further numbers and information if you wish, because I'm just conscious of where we are this evening. But I'm confident that we are providing the gold standard that we need to. There's always more we can do. The pressures in homelessness are, you know, increasing. It's something we're very, you know, conscious of, not just in refugees, but homelessness across the board. This time of year is a particularly tricky time. January can be very, very difficult and we start to see numbers, but as the Home Office is making decisions in 28, they give people 28 days. We work with people when they have that 28-day notice to find something and somewhere for them to go and to live and to thrive and to be able to do what they need to do in the city or beyond if that's what they choose to do so. So I'm happy to provide further information. We've had a couple of sessions, I know, at Scrutiny. We are currently looking at our revised rough sleeping and homelessness strategy. That is out for consultation. I think we flagged that, so that might be an area you want to have a look at as well.
Thank you. So the recommendation in the report is recommended that the Scrutiny Committee review the content of this year's annual Quality Information Report and the appended EDI Action Plan 25-26 progress update, making any comments or recommendations they wish Cabinet to consider in their deliberations. So just at this stage, we need to determine whether there's anything we'd like Cabinet to consider in its deliberations. Very much aware of the fact that we've got the Cabinet member here hearing our discussion anyway. Councillor Hucknett, then Councillor Knight.
So I'd like to make a recommendation that a research exercise is undertaken with council staff to better understand specific reasons why Norwich City Council employees may choose not to share demographic data. Can I make several? Yeah. Then I'd like to make a recommendation that any future data gathering exercises are accompanied by clear communications explaining how data will be handled and why it is being collected. I'd like to recommend that a refresh of
Right, great. Well, welcome back, everyone. So we'll just pass over to Anessa, who will just walk us through the presentation. I'm sorry, we've got quite a lot left on the agenda still. So if you can canter through it, yeah, and then we'll share the slide deck with members, and maybe they'll have some questions for you that we can do via email afterwards.
Even if questions come later, I'm happy to take any questions you may have. So the next slide is about an issue you talked about in terms of mental health. And just to tell you what we're currently doing, we have a wellbeing strategy in Norwich. We're going to ELT to talk about the mental health steering group. We're going to reinvigorate the mental health steering group. That's really important. And we're going to launch a new staff survey to understand, and again, this is a bit of a reiteration that's from what's gone before, understand mental health related absences, and we need to firm up our wellbeing strategy basically, but we've got it in hand. I think we've talked a lot about well-being and mental health and how we're going to engage with our staff. This is basically what this slide is about. Then slide 3, it's about the HR action plan. And I think there were some questions about, you wanted to know about progress. Well, we've had an action plan. We have an action plan. We've shared it with our staff, the HR staff, and we've shared it with the unions. And as a result of that action plan, we are going to launch a HR restructure in the new year. And once that restructure has been launched and implemented and appointed to, we can then look again at the action plan, if you like, phase 2, phase 1, the restructure, phase 2, implementation of the action plan. At that point, we'll be able to give Scrutiny Committee a better update in terms of where we are with our HR agenda. And as you know, we are appointing a director of people and organisational culture. We're in the process of doing that. It has now closed. We've got a long list that we're working with. And so hopefully in the new year, most of you may be engaged in the appointment of that post. And we've got a strong field. Next slide very quickly. How do you get involved in organisational culture? We've been working very closely with the head of legal and governance, Jan Robinson, and we've been working very closely with her to see how we can support the teaching and learning of members going forward. We haven't been at the forefront of this work in the past. However, we have, as I say, have been working with Jan. We will work with her to plan some governance measures and see how we can involve members in organisational culture and change. It's a new agenda, including members in our organisational change and culture, but I think it's important because you can then understand what the challenges are, what the pinch points are, what we need, the resources and so on. So I think it's really important to engage you in that. And as I say, we're working very closely with Jan with that. Induction and training, again, my learning and development business partner has been working with Jan and her team to develop some kind of training modules for the councillors. We're going to launch an enhanced induction programme in May 26, and Jan will be together with Alex will be presenting a new induction plan and policy to members development group. And also we want to engage with members to identify what members want and what members need in terms of training and development, so we can put forward an action plan going forward. Next slide very quickly. We've talked about diversity in the workforce, and we have a number of reports that we do. We work with Unison on their anti-racism charter. We've recruited EDI champions, and a senior leadership champion has been recruited. We have mental health advisors that have and mental health first aiders that we've appointed and trained. We've launched the Thrive app, which is coming next, which supports well-being in the workplace and diversity. We've got a number of policies that we're working on with Unison. Oh, sorry, I've done that. Let me go back to, sorry, on the wrong, yeah. Improving diversity, sorry. We've got a number of policies that we need to update in terms of supporting staff and improving diversity, flexible and hybrid working policies. We've got workforce diversity profiles that we're reviewing. One of the things that you were talking about earlier on is how do we know and how do we measure? The HR business partners take diversity information and profiles to their local departments on a monthly basis, so they can actually see the profile of their staff and their teams. Then I produce a quarterly matrix that deals with the council-wide, so perhaps it's something that could come to this committee, so that you can see the actual profile of the organisation and see how we are trying to develop and improve the work that we are doing. We are a disability confident leader, and that's about having improved accessibility to our work and to our organisation. I'm jumping through this quickly. Council offers specific support with staff dealing with. Somebody asked about infertility and fertility. I think this is self-explanatory. It's well-being. We've got occupational health. We've got an employee assistance program, and we've got the Thrive Wellbeing app, which we'll come to next. And we've got mental health first aiders. This is a Thrive Wellbeing app. It's an app that we got free. We've got a new occupational health provider, and as part of that agreement, we've got a free app that is accessible to everyone, including members. And when you go onto the app, it's quite intuitive and it gives you lots of information and support in terms of your well-being. I can give you more information on that. I can give Alex more information on how you can access that app if you want to have a look at it and see how it can best support you. Armed forces, we've talked about armed forces before, and I just wanted to bring up that we do have a strategy to support our armed forces. And we guarantee interviews, for example, for reservists meeting essential criteria. We've talked about that already. And we've got training, and it's also embedded in our recruitment policy, and there is financial support. Trade unions. We have a old school facilities policy for our trade unions. That's being reviewed as we speak. There is a draft that has been put together. It's not yet been shared with our unions, but it will be. We're just fine tweaking it, and it will be shared with our unions because we want to look at facilities time. We want to look at the information. We want to look at the resources that our unions have, because in terms of the employment law bill that's coming through, that's being discussed currently, there are a number of things within that relate to how an organisation works with its unions. So we're also mindful of incorporating all of those proposed new changes into some kind of draft document to share with our unions to negotiate and agree going forward. So that's somebody would have asked about that, and that's where we are currently. And finally, just some information on how we spend our training budget. And I think it's important that you see that we spend a lot of our budget on supporting staff, training staff to better support our employees, like first aid training, customer service excellence. And we have our onboard system for learning and development is called the Learning Pool. And I think Jan and the L&D business partner in HR are working to give managers not only full access, but also better understanding. I do think you have access, but it's about training, it's about raising awareness, and it's about being, it's about knowing what you can access through that portal to deliver training. And I know that Jan will be using that to support the members going forward.
Great. Thank you very much for that whistle stop.
It's a bit of whistle stop, but if you have any questions, even if you don't have any questions now, if you want to send me an email, or you know, Alex can gather some questions that you may have via email. I'm happy to answer it even before the next committee meeting, because people may want to know various bits and bobbies before the meeting.
Yeah,
but I'm happy to come back to the meeting at any time with some of our metrics, our HR metrics, which I think would be interesting.
Well, I think if you do have any questions, if we can channel those through Alex to collate those, then they can be presented as a sort of